Before we jump into today's show, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. The autumn cohorts for Start Your Podcast group program are now open. There are 5 dates between September and October, and it's a 6-week program that will get you launched before Christmas. So if podcasting was on your to-do list this year, if you really want to get your podcast up and done by the end of 2023, then come and join me for one of those cohorts and let's make it happen. I have a free masterclass available for you called Understanding the Power of Podcasting. You can go over to donnaeade.com/masterclass, watch the masterclass and get access to that enrollment. I hope to see you in one of the autumn cohorts very soon. That's donnaeade.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the show. Today I have a very special guest on the show. You have heard me previously talk about sustainability in our business. So this lady is going to help us to increase that sustainability in one particular area. Helen Rogers is the owner of Highgate Honey, a beekeeping company based in North London. As well as selling honey, she runs honey tasting workshops and has written a book about the best flowers to plant to benefit the bees. So let's jump into today's show. You're listening to the Wedding Procast UK, the place to be if you are looking to grow and streamline your wedding business. My name's Donna, I'm your host, and if you are new here, welcome. I hope you have hit that subscribe button where you listen so you don't miss an upcoming episode. And if you haven't yet, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts so that we can reach more people just like you. Let's jump into today's show. Welcome to the podcast, Helen. It is so lovely to have you here. This is a topic that I am so passionate about. I can't wait to jump in.
Oh, thank you, Donna. I'm really excited always to talk about bees, and you're a captive audience now.
So I am really excited to bring you on the show because I have been on a bit of a sustainability, eco-friendly journey for the last couple of years, really focusing on what it is that I'm using and how I'm using it in my personal life. And I think it is so important that we all think about this in our personal lives, but also within our businesses. So for me, it's a great idea to have you on just to sort of give my audience an overview of what they can do to help the cause, and also how they might be able to bring some help into their business and make their businesses a bit more bee friendly. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how you got started. How did you get into the bee market?
Yes, well, I'm Helen Rogers and I'm the owner of a small beekeeping business called Highgate Honey. We're based in North London, and I run about 25 beehives in various locations around. You can't have them all in one place because honeybees would completely dominate that area. So we have to be really mindful of the other types of bees, because we have about 270 different sorts of bees in this country. So we have to be very mindful about where we place our hives, and we always really careful about checking that there's plenty of forage for the bees as well in that area. And if there's any issues, obviously we move them straight away. So going back to my story, I started beekeeping about 10 years ago. I came to London ages ago after I graduated to become a structural engineer. And
wow.
I've worked in that industry ever since. And I have a ridiculous niche of being the person to go to for repairs to cantilever stone staircases. So I get to go in the most incredible buildings and some wonderful venues. Actually, many of them are wedding venues as well. So I know all the best staircases. Anyway, I grew up in the countryside and I was desperately missing that connection with nature. And I began to notice around the city in London beehives tucked on roofs, in parks, behind bushes, all kinds of stuff like that. And it really intrigued me. And I ended up sort of becoming a bit of a beehive spotter, I suppose.
Love it.
And I became interested in buying local honey, and sort of dithered on the edges of it for a long time. And we moved to this house about 11 years ago, and my husband surprised me with a gift of a beehive for my birthday one year.
Oh, wow.
Which was so exciting because he knew I was really into bees. And he said, we've now got the space for a hive, because we used to live on canal boats. So obviously that was never going to work. So we had the space, and the rest is history, really. So I began with one hive. And thing with bees is, once people know that you've got them, any issue with bees, you are the person that gets called up. So about a month after I got my first bees, we had some building work being done on the house, and the chap who was in charge was sharing a building yard with a whole load of other people, including a tree surgeon who had kept bees but had become allergic to their stings and was looking for somebody to take on his hives.
Oh, wow.
So I went from 1 to 5 hives overnight, and so on. The story just keeps expanding. So nowadays I run quite a lot of my own hives, but I also look after some hives for a couple of businesses as part of their kind of ecological greenness. And they've become really involved in planting for bees and promoting local honey and things like that. And as well as keeping the bees, I'm also a honey sommelier. So I went to Italy to learn this trade, which you can't really do in this country. And they take their honey so seriously over there, which was a real joy, actually. And to be in a group of people who were just bee and honey mad was a wonderful experience. And we learnt about the different types of honey come from different flowers, obviously. And in Italy, they're very interested in, pure honey from different plants. So they have the acacia tree, then they have thyme, and, so you get all these different flavors. And as part of the training, you learn to be able to identify about 20 different types of honey blind. So you don't know what they are, you just get a little sample and you have to taste and smell it and say what it is, and then they blend them and you have to be able to say what it is. So
blended. Wow.
Exactly. So that was utterly mind-blowing. So I came home and I realized that very few people understand how wonderful the honey that we produce in the UK is. So I started over lockdown running these honey tasting workshops online. Oh, wow. So I send out a box of honeys from the UK, which I've got from various beekeepers. And then I talk people through the tasting of those different honeys. So honey is so local to where it is. It's like a good comparison is the wine industry. In France, the areas are so specific, aren't they? Yeah. And you would never dream of picking all the grapes in France and mixing them all up and saying, here's some wine, would you? And that's exactly what happens with a lot of honey. A lot of companies blend the honey, and you lose all that amazing individuality and uniqueness. So that's become a bit of a hobby horse. And the last little thing that I do is really, really champion planting for bees. My mother is a horticulturalist, and we collaborated together to produce a little book called 80 Flowers for Bees, which picks out the best bee plants. And she was able to give me the sort of growing information as well. So there's loads of books out there which will say, plant this, plant that for bees. but they don't actually tell you how to look after them or where those plants should be planted, if they prefer shady or acidic soil or whatever. So we brought all that information together and produced this little book. So that's been really fun as well.
Yep. Oh, that's so good. I love it. And there's so many things in there that I was just like, oh, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about that. We could be here all day. We really could. But I will keep it short. So one of the things that really sort of struck me there was that you said that you were finding beehives. So are there rules around where you can put beehives, and how would you find out where to put them? Like, I was just like, I know that, I've watched what was it called? It was a Sherlock series based in America. I don't know if it was called Sherlock or if it was called something else. And Sherlock kept bees on his rooftop in
when
Manhattan.
He retired. Well, Sherlock Holmes retired, he's famously became a beekeeper. So,
And so I was seeing that, and I guess, your property, you do what you want. So I'm assuming that your first one you had in your garden, and then you've got 25 others around. So is there like permissions that need to be granted for that?
Well, there's no sort of license required for beekeeping in this country, and there's obviously different rules for different countries. I know, for example, in New York, you can't just slap a hive anywhere you want, but here you essentially can. But obviously, there's responsibilities that go with it, and in an urban environment, which I'm in, you've got to be really careful about where you site your hives, because they can't bother people. If they swarm, you can't have them disrupting a shopping street or that sort of thing. So I'm really, really careful about where I site my hives. Some I've got in other people's gardens who are really keen on helping bees,
the preservation.
But mostly they're tucked away. I don't advertise where they are because they are kind of vulnerable to vandalism.
I was going to say that was the other question I was going to ask, is like, how worried do you get about them? Because I'm like, if they're out in a public space, have you ever had somebody go and destroy?
I've had 2 issues. One was from badgers, which I had no idea that there were badgers in the area, and badgers love to eat the larvae in the hives. So they'd knocked over the whole hive and gone in and chewed everything up, which
goodness.
I was really shocked by. So that site, now I have an electric fence around, keep the badgers out. You learn all these things. And unfortunately, on one of my sites, some young people decided to throw rocks at one of my hives and knocked it over. I suspect that they came off a lot worse.
I mean, it literally boggles your mind, doesn't it, what young people will get up to these days? And disturbing a hive of bees doesn't sound like a sensible thing to do.
It's crazy. But I mean, having said that, at the same apiary, which I still have, because I thought, hopefully this is a one-off, I'll keep them there. And I've always strapped my hives up, so if they do get knocked over, then the bees are kept together, because the hives are sort of stacked up boxes. So if they get knocked over and they're not strapped, then they're spread all over the place, and the colony can die very quickly because they're cold. Anyway, so I went back there, checking all the time, and again there was a group of young lads all smoking weed, and I thought, oh no, this is just, I'm gonna have to move all the hives. I ended up having a good chat with them, and now whenever I go there, it's like, oh, it's Highgate honey, brilliant. And then once I had a swarm happen from those hives, and they swarmed onto the bench that they always like to sit on, and they actually rang me up and said, oh, Highgate honey, your bees have swarmed. What should we do? So I went and collected them, and they watched, and they're so into the bees now. So now
that's brilliant.
they're like the guardians of my bees, which
I
is
love
wonderful.
that. It is so good when you can change a negative round, especially in young people's lives. It's so hard. And I don't know, obviously when you think about generations ago and what kids were up to and stuff, and then we sort of had the era of youth clubs and things like that, which have now pretty much died out, and it's back to them, not really knowing what to do with themselves and being so involved in the internet and in their phones and on. So just to have opened their eyes to something that is more nature based and outside, and that they're excited about it, is really lovely to hear. Because I've got a 20-year-old and she spends her whole time on her phone, and it's just like, oh, get outside, smell the fresh air. So that's wonderful.
So true. And that whole thing of changing people is marvelous. And I quite often go into primary schools and for younger kids to talk about bees. And very often afterwards, I'm walking around and the little kids are with their parents and that was the lady that came to talk to us about the bees. And then it's the parents who come up and they say, I've learned so much, we're planting flowers and all this stuff, which is absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
I can imagine. So for those of us, I think you'd have to have been living under a rock to not know that bees are important to our existence. But for those that aren't really aware, can you kind of tell us why it is important that we sort of support bees in their endeavours?
Yeah, so as I said before, in this country, we have about 270 different types of bee.
Which is amazing.
And we rely on them for pollination. They're one of the major pollinators. There's lots of other ones like wasps and moths and things like that. But bees are incredibly important for our food system as humans, but also obviously the food chain for all other animals as well. So without them, we wouldn't have most fruit, so apples, pears, blueberries, raspberries, anything you can think of, and a great deal of vegetables as well. And we wouldn't have clover, which cows eat on, so we wouldn't have beef, and it goes on and on and on. So it's said that directly our food, about 1 in 3 bites of food is comes from a thing that's been pollinated by a bee. So a third of our food, which is mind-blowing. I don't think we would die out if bees died out, but our diet would be very, very bland. We wouldn't have many fruits and vegetables, and life just would be a whole lot less colourful, wouldn't it, as well?
Yeah.
So we rely enormously on bees, and there's been all kinds of studies done, and people say that the cost of pollination is billions and billions worldwide. And there's parts of the world where bees have been wiped out, and there's places in China where they went completely crazy with insecticides and wiped out the bee population.
Oh, wow.
So now they pay people to climb into the fruit trees and hand pollinate the trees. And
my goodness, what a nightmare.
It doesn't bear thinking about, because it's just not sustainable. And if you take care of the bees, then it's free. It's crazy.
I was going to say that's a very expensive way of getting your apples.
And they're much, much better at the job as well. Humans just are nowhere near as good.
No, not quite as delicate.
Yes, exactly. But poor bees. Their habitats have reduced and reduced and reduced over time. I think something like 90% of wildflower meadows have disappeared in this country since the Second World War, which is heartbreaking and horrifying. So it's really, 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 really important that we try and reverse some of that.
Yeah. So if we are not quite ready to get our own hive and start keeping bees, what are some of the things that we can do as individuals to help the cause?
Yeah, you definitely, there's a misconception that honeybees are endangered, and they're really not. In this country, there's 40 odd thousand beekeepers taking care of their honeybees, and so they're really well looked after. The types that are in decline are a lot of the bumblebees and the solitary bees.
Bumblebee.
I know, they're just adorable, aren't they? So it's really important that we focus on them. The honeybees have become the sort of golden child of beekeeping.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a misconception that they need protection. They don't. It's all the other bees that do. So if you would like to help bees, then the thing to do is really simple. Plant flowers, plant more flowers, plant more flowers. Don't use insecticide in your gardens, because obviously that's going to have a big impact.
Yeah.
Choose your flowers carefully to really benefit bees. Different bees have different lengths of tongue which suck the nectar out of the plants.
Oh, right.
So, for example, foxgloves, which we all know and love, no good for honeybees because their tongues are too short. They're really good for bumblebees. So there's very specific plants for individual types of bee. There's one bee called the ivy bee, and there's no prizes for guessing what they feed on.
Oh, really? Oh, I've got tons of ivy in my garden, tons of it.
But that's the thing, because people don't realise that in the autumn, when the ivy's flowering, about October time, that ivy is providing an enormous amount of forage for honeybees, but also loads and loads of other pollinators to build up their reserves over the winter to survive. So it's not just the ivy bee, but yeah, if you're thinking about trimming your ivy back, don't trim it in October, leave it until November time, and then they will have got all the benefit from it. Yeah. And then off you go. I mean, the best thing that you can plant is a tree, because if you think about it, one tree footprint on the ground isn't very big really, but the canopy will have thousands of flowers in it, and that will provide good habitat for loads of other insects as well. Yeah. But we don't always have space for a tree in our garden. If you lived in a flat, that's no good. So if you can't manage a tree, maybe a shrub, which is a smaller bushy thing. And if you can't manage a shrub, flowers are the best, ideally perennials, which are ones that come back year after year after year. If you can't do perennials, do annuals, which you have to sow every year. And what's really good is if you can plant flowers that are out at this time of the year, because we do get warmer days and the queen bees from bumblebees' nests are starting to emerge, and they need a boost of pollen and nectar. So things like crocuses, aconites, snowdrops, all those very early plants are really essential for getting them off to a good start for the year. And also at the other end of the year, all the autumn plants, things like goldenrod, the Michaelmas daisies, things like that, give them a boost into the winter. There's loads of stuff that flowers during the summer. So I would ask you to focus on the extremes of the bee season, which will definitely help them.
And you've got a book about flowers. Tell us a little bit about that and where we can grab a copy, because if we really want to focus on it, then it'd be good to know the one. Oh, there we go.
It's called
People on
80
YouTube.
80 flowers for bees, and it's all illustrated, and each flower has information, as I said, about where to plant, how big it gets, what its Latin name is. So if you want to go to a garden centre or something and buy it, you can get the exact thing. Because also within species of plants, for example, lavender, there's tons of different types of lavender. Yes. But there's only, bees like lavender, but there's some particular types that they love, so I've put that information in there. Yeah. So you can boost what you already have, hopefully get a lot more information. And that's available from my website, which is highgatehoney.com, or you can get it on Amazon.
Fabulous. Brilliant. So what I wanted to talk about next was how we might involve our businesses, because I know that you spoke about in your intro there that you work with some businesses that have hives with you and their planting efforts. So if we wanted to, and I think more and more businesses are looking at how they can be more sustainable themselves, or how they can help out charities within their business. So if somebody wanted to make it part of their business efforts, what sort of things can they do and how could they get involved?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'll give you two examples. So the one that I'm keeping bees with at the moment, they approached me, a few years ago, and they wanted hives on their roof. And I said, well, that's greenwash. It doesn't mean anything. Honeybees are not endangered. I'm not going to come and put hives on your roof. It's just ridiculous. You need to think holistically about what you're doing, because you need to commit to planting forage for these bees, so they're not going to be out competing the other native bees, and also education of your staff. And they were incredible. They went away and they thought about it for a while, and then they came back and they said, well, we've looked at the roof of our building, which is a big flat roof, and we can plant it we're going to do a green roof, and we're going to make it into a wildflower meadow, and it's a huge area, which is wonderful. And we're going to commit to working with some local charities to do tree planting, and we want you to come and do workshops with our staff, and tell them about honey and the bees and how all that works. And suddenly I thought, right, these people kind of get it now. And away we went. So I've only put a few hives up there. It's not a big array by any means, and it's been wonderful. And they've sold the honey for their foundation, so it's all going into good charitable causes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's been great. So I've done a few sort of talks, mainly online because of COVID, for their staff, and they've become so engaged, and they message me and say, I've planted a load of crocuses this weekend, or whatever it is. And no, it's been great. So it's a very kind of trendy urban company, but they're really, really committing themselves properly to doing it.
Yeah.
And the other example I was going to say was another company. They just built a brand new building in the city, and they wanted beehives on the roof again. And I said more or less the same. And they went away and thought about it. And they came back and they said, well, we've decided we're not going to have beehives. What we're going to do instead is make a pollinator garden on our roof. And we're going to put loads of flowers up there, but we're also going to put areas of like sand banks. So solitary bees can burrow into them and nest there, and we're going to provide spaces for bumblebees to nest and all of that sort of thing. And that made me so happy, because again, they got it. So I'm really anti this whole greenwash thing, and so I think they both did really well, and I'm very happy to work with people on things like that.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So really, for us as wedding vendors, a lot of us are solo entrepreneurs and things like that. So really what we want to be looking at is just doing what we can do with our space. So planting the flowers in our gardens. I mean, I am really into my bees. My other half bought me a little bee house. I wanted to make one, but it was a lot of stuff that was needed, and it was just like, it just didn't happen. I wanted something quick, so he bought me this tiny little bee house, because I didn't realize that there were so many bees that were solitary bees that like to just live on their own. I was just like, those are my bees, my people. So he
Yes.
bought me this little bee house that's got lots of different tubes of lots of different sizes so that different bees can go in and make their home. I haven't put it up yet because I don't know where to put it. Like, I don't want to ever have to move it from where I put it. So I want to make sure that when I put it somewhere, I can leave it there. So I'm a little bit like not quite sure where in my garden to actually place it, because we moved into this house in 2019 and the garden needs completely re-landscaping. We had a pond done, and I've got like 42 koi in my pond. I love it. And I'm just sort of sitting there like, if I put it on this concrete pillar in the garden, the concrete pillars aren't going to move, they're the fence pillars, so I can put it there, it won't move. But then I'm like, but what am I going to put next to it, because I obviously don't want the bees around where the sitting area that we're going to have. And then it's like, well, the other area, it's all a bit of a complicated thing, but I will get it up.
Is. Great. Oh, well, they prefer to be south facing if possible. So
well, my garden is a south facing garden.
Perfect.
So yeah, so really I need to put it on my house, don't I?
Sounds like it.
On my back wall.
But I mean, don't be afraid of moving it if necessary. There's tons of information about bee hotels and stuff online, but it is quite important to clean them out when they're empty as well each year.
Oh wow.
Because they can harbour disease and so on. So if you want them to be reused, because quite often people get them and then the bees move in, and then they're gone, and then the following year they never come back. They're not reused, and the reason is that they aren't clean. And bees are super hygienic creatures.
See, I knew there was a reason that I had you on this show. Just that little nugget right there, because I would have thought, they would have just done what they do and I could just leave it, and that would have been me. So I'm so glad you said that, because
but I mean,
you don't know what you don't know, do you?
Even better than the bee hotels and so on are like hollow stems of plants and things like that. So if you have plants in your garden that die back over the winter, leave them there until the temperatures get above about 10 degrees each day, because there may well be bees hibernating in them.
Oh wow.
So it's, you don't need to go to the expense of purchasing a specific thing for the bees. They're so adaptable, and they've got it all sorted out.
Brilliant. Okay, so the final thing before we go, obviously want to bring it back to the wedding industry, and the honey. So I've known a lot of couples that want to get a bit more eco-friendly, a bit more sustainable with their weddings, and one of the ways that I've seen people do it is through honey-based favors that they give out to their couples. So I wondered if you had a couple of ideas of things that we could use for favors or suggest to our couples, especially the wedding planners listening who kind of help the brides with that thing. What can we do with our couples to help the bees and promote bee care?
Yeah, well, I mean, honey is a great choice for weddings, because it's long had associations with love and fertility, and even as an aphrodisiac. So I think it's a great choice as a favour. I think there's a story about Cupid that he used to dip the tips of his arrows in honey, so when he fired them into lovers' hearts, it would make them sweeter.
Sweet. Oh yes, love that.
So a bee-related favour or theme would be amazing for a wedding, I think. So I mean, personally, I produce honey, lots of honey, and sometimes I get approached by couples who want something really local that they can source within a few miles of where they're getting married, and honey is such a great example of that sort of thing. My tip, if you're a planner or if you're planning a wedding, then get in touch with a beekeeper early as possible, because we have to order our jars and containers to put bees in, honey into, a long way in advance. So if you've got a summer wedding this year, then start talking to a local beekeeper now, and then they can get what you need in time. Because time goes really fast. Beekeeping season, like the wedding season, is in the warmer months of the year. So beekeepers tend to be incredibly busy at that time of the year. So it's much better to talk to them now up to about March, and then later in the year as well. So yeah, I think honey would make a lovely gift, and you can get some really cute little decorative jars, and you can make a nice label and all that sort of thing. But other ideas, we make a lot of beeswax candles, which I think would be a really sweet thing as well, because they can be made in lots of shapes. I've just started making heart-shaped candles, which are just adorable. They're really a bit taller, about twice the height of a tea light, but that sort of diameter, and that with a nice ribbon, it would be such a sweet thing. Other things, I also make soap, which is made with our beeswax and honey, and I think that would be a lovely thing to have as well. And something to remember the couple by. Every time you wash your hands, I wonder how they're getting on. And I think that would be a really nice thing. And it's also a practical gift, because I don't like things that just take up space in my house. Just
the clutter stuff. Exactly. Oh, I can't stand it. I have a YouTube channel called Bride to Be TV, in which I talk to brides about what they can do for their wedding day, how they can save money, how they can, and the questions they need to ask vendors and things like that. And one of the things that I said was just that, a majority of favors get left on tables. It's just standard. As a photographer, I saw it all the time. People would just leave them because they were either, you've got to think about how a couple comes to a wedding. The bride is the female of a couple, is not bringing her big bag that she walks around with Monday to Friday. She's bringing a little clutch. And, if there is a male counterpart to that couple, he's got his pockets that are full of his wallet and his phone as usual. So there's no room for anything that's too big. So it either has to be something that's kind of handed out as people are leaving, to make sure that they take it with them, or it's got to be something that's small enough to fit into a clutch handbag. And go on, sorry.
No, I was just thinking that another thing that would be really nice is some seeds, some flower seeds, which would be appropriate for bees. Because again, that's super little, and you could just tuck that in anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to actually say, on top of that, I have seen one of my members, so I run the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors. One of my members is a wedding stationer, and she can make you invitations that are impregnated with seeds, so Amazing. That you would just, and it's biodegradable, nice paper, and you put the invitation on there, and the ink is special ink that's not going to damage the seeds in any way, and you just throw the invitation on your, dig it over in a bit of soil and water it, and you've got your own little wildflower garden, which I just think is an amazing way to be more eco-conscious and give back to the environment with your wedding. So that Definitely. Sort of combined with a pot of honey on the day would be a really nice theme to take through your day.
I really like that idea. I mean, it's also important to think about flowers. Where have the flowers come from for your wedding? Because you could do some really good support by choosing local flower grower who's growing seasonal flowers which are appropriate for your area. If you're going to go down that route, I think that would be a really nice thing to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, guys, we have found out a lot about bees. A lot of misconceptions, I think, have been broken today, because I would have instantly thought, I need to help the honeybees, and what we're hearing is actually no, the honeybees are being taken care of quite well, and it's the other 269 varieties that need our help. So there are lots of ways that we can help. planting seeds, buying locally, get in touch with your local beekeeper and see how they could use your help and how you might be able to support them in what they're doing. And yeah, pass that information on to your couples and let them know how they might be able to incorporate that, especially if they are a couple that are very willing and wanting of sustainability and eco-friendly stuff within their wedding day. So I hope you found that interesting, guys. I've absolutely loved our conversation, Helen. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So where can people find out more about Highgate Honey?
So we have a website, which is highgatehoney.com, and we're on all the social media, and our handle is Highgate Honey.
Fabulous. Well, head on over, guys, find out more about Highgate Honey. I actually could sit here and talk to you all day because I'm now fascinated, because I'm going to admit something. The last thing I admit, I don't actually like honey.
No,
I wish I did. Like,
it.
I love bees, but what you're saying to me is that I actually need to try some more honey, like wine, because I don't like a lot of wine, but there are a couple of bottles that I do like. So by the sound of it, I need a honey tasting session with you, Helen.
I can guarantee there's a honey for everyone. I have lots of people who say this to me, actually. You're not the first person. And there's always a honey for you. So don't give up. You have to try them all.
I will. Yeah, there's a lot of honey out there. Right, guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss when our next episode comes out. If you are listening on the podcast, please subscribe where you listen. Head over to our website, which is spwv.co.uk/blog, and you will find all the episodes there as well. Until next week, bye for now. Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.